Chess and Psychology. Today I'm gonna show you ideally 2 games and tell you about how preparing before the game accurately helped me have an easier game. It sounds very logical, but some people just don't really like preparing or don't really know how to do it accurately. So the things that you could know before the game, you kind of end up spending so much time and energy and trying to hopefully find it in the game. And also the fact that just being able to detect your opponent's weaknesses, especially in openings, it gives you the chance to try and exploit them more rather than just going to the game and playing plain chess. So let's dive in. So this is a game that I had with Gunay Mammadzada. She had more rating back then. Pretty sure she has more rating now. But in this specific game, I was better prepared, and yeah, this was in World Junior Chess Championship 2015. 2015 was one of my big years. I played so many tournaments. I was playing tournaments pretty much every month, and yeah. Alright, so I do remember that before the game I knew that she was a big Najdorf player, and if I remember correctly, she had another game in the same tournament earlier round that she played Najdorf. So the big idea with Najdorf is that black wants to simply play e5 and kick your knight away, and then try to simply develop at bishop e6, bishop e7, maybe knight d7, maybe knight c6. And white has a lot of different variations on how to proceed. White could try for a long castle, like with bishop e3, queen d2, f3, or something like bishop g5, which is one of the big lines. Or white could simply try to do short castle, like bishop comes to e2, bishop e2, and then you just simply do short castle. So there are a lot of different ideas, and so usually players stick to 1 or 2 of them and switch between them. But I thought I had a little bit of wider range of what to play against Najdorf, that I necessarily wouldn't have played it on a, if I was just playing it right now as a friendly game, I probably wouldn't play bishop c4, but in this game I did, and it was kind of also one of those moves that it is very interesting. It's very classic. It's not too many crazy ideas. Recently I've seen a lot of different players try to go for some stuff like maybe rook g1, g4, h3, g4. Yeah, so I decided to go for bishop c4, mainly because she did have a game earlier in the same tournament, different rounds, and her opponent also played bishop c4, and so it was easier for me to prepare against it. So if you're playing a tournament and you happen to see that your opponent played a game in the same line that you might want to play, it is a good idea to consider it more seriously, especially because usually when players win the game, they don't really go and check their games as deeply as they would when they lose the game. So it is a good idea to, even if your opponent won that game, for you to go and play it against them if you're prepared. So e6 is the good move to play, because if something like e5 here, if black were to play e5, the problem is that wherever you put the knight, this d5 square is already super weak and you already are dominating it. You could probably just simply go knight f3. You could try for something like knight e2, and then you might want to do something like this. You have different ideas, and there is no it should be to your preference, but the idea is that the d5 square is super weak and you're just gonna jump in it. So e6 is the move that's been played for decades, maybe more. And after e6, the idea is that black simply wants to try and play b5 and maybe push for b4, especially because this knight is protecting this pawn. So black is trying to go after white's pawns. So this move, bishop b3, is one of those good moves that is slightly prophylaxis, and it's simply, if I were to play something else after b5, I kind of was going to play bishop b3 anyways, so it makes more sense to play bishop b3 now, and it's not as provoking b5 anymore. So she did play b5 first. I mean, it was the main line at the time, and also b5 still follows the same ideas, maybe b4, maybe queen b6, because black needs to create some space in the queen side, because if black were to simply just play bishop e7 and short castle, white has way too much space. This bishop here is really nice, putting more pressure on e6 pawn, on f7. So here, after b5, I played bishop g5. The idea is kind of simple. If black were to play b4, after I move this knight, my e4 pawn is no longer under attack because of that this knight is pinned. Also, bishop in g5 is a very nice square to be, because next move you could try to do something like queen f3 and put more pressure here. Also, I prepared this before the game. After bishop e7, queen f3. So now you see the queen f3 is not only attacking the knight, it also has some ideas on this rook, because it's currently defenseless. So if it were white to move again, probably something like e5 was at least worth considering, if not winning. So after queen f3, what do you think black should do?
Possibly knight to d7, knight b to d7.
Okay, so you just want to ignore it and you want to develop. I think the problem is if you were to play something like knight d7, I would get this knight c6 ideas, even if e5 doesn't work, which, I mean, technically, okay, e5 you could try to take, and if I take the rook, you could take this knight, so there could be some compensation. So yeah, I think I would be more comfortable playing something like
bishop b7.
Where?
Bishop b7.
Instead of knight d7?
No, bishop.
Bishop to d7.
It's white to move. It's white to move.
You say
Instead of knight to d7, you want bishop b7? Yeah, I think bishop b7 is a pretty logical move, and bishop b7 should be played either now or slightly later, because this bishop doesn't really have a future in this diagonal, and to simply think about it, this bishop does belong to b7, so you might as well do it now to avoid any kind of tactics and e5s. So she decided to play queen b6. Queen b6 is also a good move. I'm also pretty sure it was her preparation. And the thing is with queen b6, now e5 is kind of sketchy, because you could simply just take, like if I play e5, you could just take. If I take a8, now you're attacking my knight, and you might have some ideas with castle, bishop b7, trying to trap my queen over here. So that's something that I thought wasn't really worth playing e5. And after queen b6, I wanted to play simple chess, So I looked at long castle, and now I do want to play e5 because if e5 you take, I still can take on a8, but when you take on d4 I could play knight e2 and my pieces are more ready to march on your king. So after knight d7, that idea kind of dials down a little, because if e5, there's always this bishop b7 too, and now I have to decide where to put my queen, and when I move the queen somewhere, then this e5 pawn is hanging, and just knight takes e5 and black just picks up my pawn. So here, take a little bit of time and think after knight d7 as white, how do you want to move forward? Keep in mind that with black, there are few moves such as bishop b7 and short castle. Like these two moves are most likely black's next two move, regardless of what you do. So think about how do you want to march on the king side. Yeah.
We have a suggestion from chat, queen g3.
I like that idea. But what are your next few moves? So you want your queen on g3. What else? Another way to think about it, queen g3 is indeed a good move, even if not right now, but the queen's job on f3 is done, because the queen on f3 can't really do anything else, even though it's kind of like attacking the knight, maybe keeping an eye on the rook, maybe after this bishop b7, it's the bishop who is kind of annoying the queen. So it's time to think about another square for the queen. So I do like the idea queen g3, maybe not immediately, or even immediately, but my question is more like, where else do you want your other pieces to be?
I was thinking bishop takes e6, pawn takes, knight takes, and then knight's king can't castle.
Taking on e6 immediately is not. It's a good idea to think about, because it kind of helps you remember that this e6 is weak. But right now I don't believe it works, because least of all could simply take back, and this knight e5 kind of attacks your knight with the bishop.
Knight
Knight
takes g7.
I'm just kind of shooting moves here, but I'm not as comfortable playing something like this.
Yeah.
My pieces are not that ready. Also, maybe even not taking immediately. Maybe something about knight e5 should be okay too.
Okay.
Yeah, and now where do you want to place your queen? If you play like queen h3, now I can take, and now I can think about king f7.
Well, I would probably just take anyway. Instead of move my queen, I would rather just take and
Take what?
have 2 pieces for my bishop.
Do you want to take like f7?
Yeah. I mean. I guess so. But it's probably too soon for that.
Yeah, that's the point. It is a little too soon to take on e6, but it is a good idea to keep it in mind because it will come up later again. And it's not about not letting black castle, because okay, for example, if you didn't have this e4 pawn, like if this pawn was out of the board, then yeah, you kind of wanted to open up the file on the king, so you might consider sacrificing more seriously, like playing rook e1, stuff like that. But this pawn is kind of not allowing your pieces to attack the king directly, even if the king is in the center.
And then my other move was bishop e3.
So you want to just bring your bishop back? I don't think it's a bad idea, but I think between bishop e3 and the idea with queen g3 is better, because you simply play queen g3 and you have more ideas how to attack the king after the king plays short castle. You could think about something like bishop h6. So in the game I went with rook e1. Again, still home prep, but I knew it wasn't just that I remembered the moves, I knew the ideas behind them. And that's something that we usually make mistakes, like when we are trying to memorize something, we kind of just go by our memory instead of trying to understand it. And something that really helps me understand how to remember the move is to question myself. So where does this piece belong? What I'm trying to do with this piece? Ideally, where could I try, ideally and realistically, how can I maneuver this piece? So these are some of those stuff that I try to ask myself, even if I'm learning a new opening, even if I'm preparing some line against some opponent. It's not just about the moves, like on move 11 I'm gonna play rook e1. It's not like that. It's you kind of have to understand why you're doing it. So rook e1 is a good move because you're developing the rook. There are other ideas that you could start to like push over here, maybe h4, h5, and after short castle you would like have a pawn over here. That wasn't really what I was going for. This bringing the rook out is a better idea. Castle, now queen g3. I do want to play queen h6, bishop h6, and go for the g7 mate. But black simply played knight c5. So now it's white to move again. Could you think and let me know how do you think white should proceed? What are some of the ideas for white?
Said it's black to move.
It's white to move. Black just played knight c5.
Bishop h6.
I like the idea. The bishop h6 doesn't work.
Yeah, I'm afraid of knight h5.
Yeah, and also I think Not even knight h5, something more simple than that, just knight e8 to keep control.
Yeah.
So now that you see bishop h6 doesn't work, even though you did queen g3, do you think queen on g3 is happy, or could it be in a better place? Because the idea with bishop h6, queen takes g7 isn't the only mate that you can think of. There is another maneuver that you could go for.
Rook e3.
Yeah. What is your idea?
Just get another piece. Get another piece out. Create a good weakness.
Yeah, usually rooks do like third ranks. Not necessarily third ranks, but just being a little above the pawn structure. So if I have all of my pawns on the second rank, my rook does like to be on third rank. This is pretty cool because now you want to do stuff like queen h4, rook h3, and go for this guy. So the way that so the thing is, even though this looks pretty cool and white is doing everything logical and just developing and making simple moves, and white development looks better and everything, this is still a pretty equal position, and I knew that before the game. So bishop b7, queen h4. Now black needs to open up some room to breathe, so rook c8. Now rook g3. I simply want to take knight. So how do you think black can save the knight?
Bring the other knight back.
That's one way. The problem is, as soon as you move this knight, the e6 square, the e6 pawn gets kind of weird. So you could now start thinking about sacrifices here. And after you move the king, and the knight is still pinned. So what other options?
Just play rook h3.
It's black to move.
The queen back.
Queen d8. Yeah, I think queen d8 is one of the ideas, but I don't think it works right now, because even if queen d8, this e5 looks very tempting. And now this knight could jump around. Probably taking e6 is the way to go, or even knight f5 should, I mean, both of them look good and good. So so what is the problem with this knight? The fact that this g7 pawn is pinned, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how can you unpin it?
With the king.
Yeah. So king f8 is actually the best move. And so after king f8, I can't really take on f6 anymore. Theoretically I could, but it's not really good, because I could try to go for this pawn, but also there is this little tactic here, and now my rook falls. Everybody so far so good?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So after king f8, I do remember that when I was looking at this back in the hotel before the game, I was like, well, king f8, the best move that computer was suggesting again at the time was rook f3, and I did play rook f3, and to my understanding I just wanted to sacrifice over here, and so I don't want to give up the move. What do you think is the best move for black? Think about what were the problems last move when the rook was on g3, and think if they still apply. e6 pawn. If you play knight g8, f7 pawn is pinned, so I can just do knight e6 check.
So you move the king again.
Yeah, actually, king g8 is the best move. You just go back, because the idea is that now again white's best move is to play rook g3 and repeat. And it is kind of funny. So when I was looking at it before the game, I wasn't really looking to make a draw, but the way I talked myself into playing this line, I was like, if she can come up to the board and just find all of these moves and be mentally okay with just perpetual, well, that is the line and that is what the position is going for. So I was like talking myself into it. And so she didn't play king g8. I didn't get a chance to ask her after the game. I thought that might be mean. So she played b4. But I think another one of the moves that could have been better is like queen c7 or maybe rook c7. So the idea is simply after, like, if I do some takes over here, like black is trying, and white is still slightly better, but it's nothing like what happened in the game. And so let's look at queen c7 too. If queen c7, do you think this sacrifice still works, taking on f6?
I believe so. Bishop takes first.
Okay, so you
That right now though, is that the knight is in the way. And that was c5.
so you can just take with the bishop and then do this version of sacrifice, but it is kind of again draw. Yeah, I did believe if she could find it, she deserved half a point. So now I'm still have some ideas on e6 square. I might want to try and push for e5. I might want to simply just do check, check, check. It depends on the black's next move, but this is an equal position and most likely would have ended in a draw. But after b4, I was out of preparation already. Move 17, haha. And so the moves that I was thinking about was, all right, so I gotta move this knight. What should I do with this? Or do I have to move the knight? Can I just take on f6? So take a little bit of time and think about this, because it's pretty nice and there are a lot of takes and threats in the position. So So what are the moves you're thinking about? What are your candidate moves? Wow, no candidate moves. I was out of preparation.
We are too.
Good, good.
Well,
I'm trying to figure out which one's more important. To take first. Or to take with. Bishop or rook.
seeing some knight d5s.
That's actually pretty cool. But I don't think it works.
Okay.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a crazy move. It could just be about which piece of your opponent is kind of annoying you and try to exchange it off.
All of them.
So okay, let me rephrase the question. Which piece of black do you think is the strongest, like holding it all together? Not all, but defending a lot of the things you want to attack.
I would say the knight because
The knight on c5 or f6. You get to pick only one.
What about moving the knight to a4?
Ah, thank you. Yeah, knight a4 is actually the move I went for. When I played knight a4, I thought that she would play knight b3, and that my thought process was that, all right, least of all, this knight can hang here, and there is no more attack, and now I can focus on creating something over here, and probably something like queen a5 I would have taken, and some crazy ideas. Or if if queen c7, I could just try to go for this check again. If king g8, perpetual. If rook e8, rook e1 with bringing the other rook in. And if king e8, just defending the c2 pawn to freeing my d4 knight. And so these are the moves that I was looking at. I went over queen a5 too fast. Let's look at it one more time. If queen a5, take with pawn, just take on h7, and this should be good enough. If bishop takes f6, you can give this check. If f takes e6, there is rook, and this, least of all, there's a perpetual, and if not, there should be rook d3 bringing the other rook in. If now king goes away, be cautious because your queen is under attack, so you kind of have to take it, and you just save the knight. So it's like two knights. Yeah, it is two knights and one rook against two rooks and one bishop. So it's an exchange down, but it is a good strategic idea because you can do this check. d6 is falling, f6 is weak. So this is something that would be a good idea to look at, and the way to understand how is, after saying knight comes to a4, you're simply creating a distraction for this knight. And knight a4 is kind of losing on spot, but knight b3 would have had a better fight. because even though white has a better attack, white has to be very precise, whereas after knight a4 it's not that hard to come up with the winning plans. We've been looking at it for the past few minutes. So what do you think is the winning plan? Why did we want the knight from c5 to be distracted away?
Well, it's less effective now, and then it's taking a lot of pressure off the e4 pawn.
So you can attack the pawn on e6.
Yeah. So do you think it's the time to take on e6, or do you prefer to just take on a4?
Probably a4.
Taking on a4, I think it's a it is a good idea and strategically kind of makes sense, but your bishop on a4 is not doing anything. So to me it didn't make much sense to take on a4. So yeah, the idea was that, you see, the way to start thinking about how to make these kind of decisions to sacrifice is, usually it works if you don't like take back immediately. So here, if after knight a4 take, you take back it, whoops, if you take on a4 immediately, you don't even get the chance to see other moves. So the way to try and teach yourself not to immediately take back and to see these kind of intermediate moves such as knight takes e6 is that it is a very nice and efficient idea to try to teach yourself to organize your candidate moves by first checks, then takes, and then moves with threats, or like takes backs and stuff like that. And so you only have one check in this position, and that's knight e6. So you do have a bunch of other takes on f6 that I do think are also efficient, but it doesn't necessarily work right now. So it is a better idea to take on e6 first, open up the king, and then go for the this attack. So I've already told you that this is winning, but try to find the winning line. It is black to move, so think about what if, does it actually matter if black would take with bishop or pawn, and what would your move be after both of those moves?
So obviously bishop takes,
Okay.
and rook takes, pawn takes, queen takes, check.
If king g8,
Bishop takes, and it's forking,
and it's mate.
and it's mate.
Yeah. So king has to go to e8. So regardless of taking with the pawn or the bishop, whoops, well, actually taking with the pawn, queen takes h7 should be a more clear win. But in this position, what if king g8?
You have
the white bishop
check
attacking.
the bishop.
Yeah. And how do you finish it off?
Efficiently.
I want to say you have mate in 2.
Bishop, we can move the bishop.
Yeah, bishop f5 is a good idea. I was also looking at rook h6, Because if take, queen f6 mate. If not, rook h7 is coming mate. Probably there are other moves that win too. Bishop f5 should also be winning enough. But yeah, so king can't run away, so has to take back. Now what do we do?
Queen takes.
I agree. King g8, bishop takes e6 mate, right? So the king has to go the other way. Now, how do you win this? It looks winning, but you still need to find it. Remember, keep thinking about checks and takes.
Okay, queen takes e6.
That is one check.
Or queen h8.
It's another check. What about your bishop? What is your bishop doing there?
Bishop takes. Bishop takes a4.
So that's another check. So yeah, these are the moves that it's a good idea to calculate. So take a little bit of time, calculate these.
Queen takes pawn.
Okay.
And then either whichever side it moves. He said the rook can take the pawn, right? Take
Yeah.
the pawn.
Yes, but
But you want a mate.
no. Yeah, because if queen e6, king d8, rook takes d6, it is good and realistically should be winning, but you're giving your opponent some chance to try and come up with stuff because whoops. Realistically, this is still should be winning, but it is two rooks versus a queen and a bunch of pawns, and it's simply not the cleanest win. It is good, but so
I think bishop takes the knight.
what if bishop c6?
Yes.
Whoops. What if bishop?
Covers, yeah.
So what now?
Queen takes e6.
In this specific, I mean, I think rook d6 is winning enough. If bishop takes a4, rook takes b6, or if queen takes e6, check first and then take the queen, and then it would be a rook and a bishop versus the queen and bunch of pawns, and also a lot of checks are happening. So I do think that rook takes d6 is winning enough, but maybe queen e6 is also good. Now maybe you could try rook d3. You want to try and checkmate over here. One thing that worries me is what if you just black tries to bring in reinforcements. again, it shouldn't really work, but I kind of if it was in the real game, I probably would have just went to a rook d6, because if now take, simply take check, or take this, now you want to play rook e6. You might want to even give check here, play rook b7. So that's what I was thinking about. And what if rook c6?
You can still go queen takes e6.
Ideally, I like my queen on f6, because it's kind of like keeping the king very in the center, because if queen e6, the king could try to go to f8. It should still be winning, so
Or rook takes d6.
yeah, I think that's the more efficient way. But again, either of them should be winning enough. So find the win. It's
Bishop takes.
so you want to play bishop c6?
Not quite yet. I'd rather go. Rook takes. Rook takes e6.
Oops. Hold on. You want to take this with the rook.
Yeah.
King d7. King c8.
So I would go queen f5.
The black king feels like it's kind of slipping away, and I don't like it.
Queen f5.
I like here you have a much more clear win.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be mate. You can just try to eat so many pieces that black has to resign.
Yeah, rook takes e8. No, rook takes d8,
Queen d8.
and then queen takes e6.
Then queen just comes to e7.
Bishop takes.
But you're just a bunch of pawns. We want pieces, real pieces.
Bishop takes.
And then bishop takes back. Again, that's also winning, but we're looking for clear win. No chance for your opponent to try and come back.
You want more clear than winning.
No, I want the most clear winning.
Okay.
The clearest winning.
So from this point, not from prior.
No, from right now.
I see.
Queen check.
King e7. Remember, you are one full rook down. Well, not full, because they're a bunch of pawns, but you are a rook down. Why hasn't anybody suggested queen takes e6?
I did.
Not
Wait, no one suggested that?
no.
Oh, I was gonna say that a long time ago then.
Not in this position. You said it the move before.
I said it the move before.
Yeah. Well, you see, okay, you did say it here, and then I said, well, the king might go to f8.
That's why I was asking.
And like queen e6 here is such a clear win. King f8, you just give a check again. If king goes to g8, bishop b3, win. If king goes back, whoops, well, she resigned. But if king goes back to e8, so what's the difference between this pawn being here or not? What? Yeah, and now you have one more piece that's going after the rook. You can just simply take, you can just do rook c6, bishop c6, bishop c6, check. Even if rook d7, you take it, queen falls.
Okay, I always thought about. Okay, I always did bishop takes instead of rook takes.
Yeah, rook takes is a slightly more tricky because you're attacking the queen. There's no way that the queen can run off to that you won't hunt it down and take it, because the next move is with check. And also if take, you just take, the king can't go anywhere. So rook d7 and just take.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was the most clear win. And a lot of other things are still better and winning, but yeah, this was also kind of the most painful one. And yeah, I did have another game prepared that we didn't really get into because this game got a lot tacticier than intended. So we will go over the other game next time, and I hope you liked it. It was pretty cool. And yeah, I do think that the last chance my opponent had was earlier when she took here, knight takes a4. I think after this the game was pretty one-sided. I was just chasing and I was just taking and sacrificing, and I'm not complaining, but knight b3 would have been kind of harder on me. So maybe in your game, if you end up being in the black side, just try to find the moves that are most annoying to your opponent, because knight takes b3, at least of all, it reduces the threat on e6 pawn, because the bishop isn't here anymore. And also the knight on a4 is sort of misplaced, even though you won't have any kind of attack with black after a takes b3, but the knight is misplaced. So yeah, try to put yourself in your opponent's shoes and think what would be the most annoying to me, and try to do that as opponent. Yeah, that's kind of all we had time for today. Hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yeah.